up bow, right? Down bow. Huh? Nothing wrong with that. Right then, up bow. Now, I just noticed something. Would you show us your bow? Let's show us all. Are you going to shoot some arrows before the session is over? Why do you tighten your bow like that? Huh? Is something wrong with the stick?
Weather.
Huh? Weather?
Yeah.
Well, even so, do you need it tighter than that?
No.
Okay. You can press the violin from today to tomorrow, and there's no tone until the bow touches the string. So the bow is the most important tool, the most important feature. The bow has to be well balanced in the hand. The bow should be balanced using all of the fingers. I like to think of the three fingers as being a kind of pyramid. And the little finger I keep hidden like that, because if you extend that little finger and apply any pressure, it's counterproductive to the index finger. The fingers should work at all times together. There has to be complete flexibility of finger movement as well as wrist movement. Everything is directed by the fingertips. Every stroke is developed with the fingertips. Now, there are several schools of holding the bow. I was brought up by an Izai student, a great teacher. His name is Leon Samatini, who taught me the Franco-Belgian school, which basically employs the fingers. The third finger is touching the eye of the frog. I call that little circle the eye. The index finger is never beyond the knuckle. It's before the knuckle. And all three fingers are always working at the same time and working freely. There's no tension in the hand. The middle finger plays a role of meeting the thumb. It balances the other two fingers. The little finger's hidden. I have something peculiar. I let the nail on that little finger grow so I can clip it behind the third finger. I clip it on the bow that way, and it sits comfortably. I don't let the little finger slide. The Franco-Belgian school, which is Izai and Violin, employs a complete sweeping bow, and with this manner of holding the bow, it's much easier to play at the frog. It's much easier to accomplish things at the frog. Now, I also studied with a great teacher at the Curtis Institute of Music, Ephraim Zimbalist. And Ephraim Zimbalist was a student of Leopold Auer. Leopold Auer was the teacher of all the super great violinists, Mischa Elman, Ephraim Zimbalist, Jascha Heifetz, Nathan Milstein, and so on. They were the best violinists of the 20th century came out of the Russian school. The basic difference in the two schools of bowing is that in the Russian school, the bow is held beyond the knuckle of the index finger. It's held, and the wrist is slightly slanted, so that the little finger, the third finger is not as low, not as deep in the violin, not touching the eye, and the little finger, for the most part, is flying. It makes it a little bit more difficult to play at the frog. You can produce a very thick sound in bowing this way. I'm fortunate to have studied with both schools, and depending on what I play, I change my bowing grip. Do you know that the bow is vibrating at all times? You know that? You know that? If you just put the bow on a string without drawing, look what happens. Interesting, isn't it? If you play open A, it can be very beautiful. And I've seen this tendency in the last 30 years or so, avoiding all open strings because we've come into the habit of applying too much bow pressure to everything that we're playing. You really shouldn't be pressing the bow on your strings. You're not ironing a shirt, you know. You're just you're drawing the sound from the. See that? If the bow doesn't vibrate, that's why I was talking to Elizabeth before. Tightening the bow will not allow the bow to vibrate. I mean, tightening to such an extent. It wouldn't matter if you're playing a fine tourte or Simone, you know, such as I'm using, and just using a very ordinary stick, you know, because these bows have to vibrate. That's why every bow produces a slightly different sound. Now, when you're playing that opening harmonic, you're not allowing it to sound, to sing. Draw your bow. See? It is a wonderful, it's like a flute. Huh? But draw your bow. Do that for me. Yeah, no, good. Now I go to extremes. To me, that's a wonderful sound. Yeah. Rather than playing all the time with that energy and that vibrato and all that can become quite dull. I mean, something like this is refreshing, like a nice cold drink. Huh? Do that just from the beginning now. Think about it. Elegant with your bow. Huh? Good. Nice. Keep your rhythm. Don't lose your rhythm. Good. Rhythm. Move your bow. Don't rush. In order to effect a seamless bow change, because we certainly, when playing a lyric moment, we don't want to hear the start and stopping of. That has to be avoided at all costs. So I call it the seamless bow change. When going down bow, you do it more on the flat surface of the hair. Going towards the point, there's a slight turn of the bow, and now you're coming up slightly at the angle. As you're going all the way to the frog, you're again turning and then coming down. So it's this move. It's actually a figure eight. You cannot play angularly. It has to be in circular moves. In 1756, Leopold Mozart, who was the father of the great composer Amadeus Mozart, wrote a treatise on the principles of violin playing. And whatever he put in that book is good today. All the principles are covered, and he makes a particular point of holding the bow, and there is a drawing, actually, of the correct way to hold it, and he calls it the error. And interesting to note, the error is when the fingers are spread apart on the bow like this. Holding it correctly is what I was talking about before, where the fingers are working as a unit. When you do this, you're distributing the strength, and it's actually counterproductive. What happens with a grip like this, or even extending the index finger, is that you're applying false pressure. And when you're applying false pressure, you're going to spoil your sound. You're going to force the tone out of the violin and not let it come out of the instrument naturally. The violin only has a certain maximum of sound. It's not a trumpet, you can't blow harder, and by pressing harder, you're only going to ruin the quality of sound that you can produce. One should not press the bow too hard. Now, there are moments where we're applying quite a bit of pressure, and all the pressure is being applied with the fingers of the right hand. You do not use your arm to apply pressure. The arm at all times must remain flexible, free. Whatever you do in wanting to get a thicker or louder sound is happening with the fingers. Observe, if I'm going to play and start pressing, not a very pleasant sound. Using the same amount of pressure and then drawing the bow quickly, you'll hear something now. You see it? Maybe I'm pressing even more. But the speed of the bow is proportionate to the amount of pressure that you use. It's a very delicate balance, very delicate, in that sometimes we're not even aware of the fact that we're not moving the bow fast enough. And keeping that bow in motion it keeps everything moving freely. And it's so important, because if you're playing, it's a misconception. I was just going to talk about double stops. That's 2 notes at the same time, or 3 notes together. It doesn't take more pressure to do that. It's not pressure that makes 3 strings play at the same time. There are 2 little secrets to that. See, you're playing 3 notes together very easily without forcing at all. Now, if I relaxed in the speed of the bow, it would begin to sound awful. So there's a very fine balance in how much pressure to apply, the biting of the bow, and the amount of speed necessary to make it sing, and the follow through, which is so important when you go. Or you scream. You see, it stops immediately. The whole follow through it produces the sound.